Hi everyone, we're looking at notes 1.2, which is on finding missing side lengths. So it says find the missing sides in the following triangles and then round to the nearest thousand if necessary. So before we do anything at all, because we're talking about trig and we've got right triangles in our trigonometry right here, we're going to write out SOHCAHTOA because SOHCAHTOA is always going to help us out with our right triangles if we have angles in them. So if you take a look at question number 1, you have an angle that's 29 degrees. And we want to find out how big side X is. So right here, this side, we have to identify whether it is opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. And if you see right here, it can't be the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. And it's not opposite because it's not across from it. It's adjacent because it's next to it. So we know that this is the adjacent. Okay? And then right here, the 7 we know has to be the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So if you take a look right here, this is telling us that we need to use the trigonometric ratio that has the adjacent and the hypotenuse in it, which is cosine according to SOHCAHTOA. So that means, don't forget that whenever you do a trig ratio, so trig ratios are always of angles. So there's no such thing as just sine. It has to be sine of an angle. So like sine of 10 degrees or sine of 35 degrees. So here, because it's cosine, we're going to say cosine of the angle we're looking at, which is 29. Okay? And it's equal to the adjacent, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 7. Okay, now my goal is to get this x alone. I want to figure out what this x is going to be. So what I'm going to do is to get the x alone, what I have to do is get rid of this divided by 7. So right here, to get rid of divided by 7, I'm going to multiply by 7. And this 7 and this 7 will cancel out. But whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. Now be very careful that you write the 7 in front of the cosine because we don't want to multiply the angle of 29 degrees by the 7. We want to multiply the ratio of the cosine of 29 degrees by the 7. So right here, we end up getting 7 times the cosine of 29 is equal to x. So I will go into Desmos or whatever calculator you're using. Again, make sure you're in degrees. I'm going to type in 7 times the cosine of 29, okay? And then I'm going to press enter, and this is my value right here. It asked us to round to the nearest thousandths. So if I look right here, I go tenths place, hundredths place, thousandths place. I have a 2 right here in the thousandths place. So I look at what comes after the 2, which is a 3. And because it's not 5 and above, I don't give it a shove, so that 2 stays the same. So right here, I end up getting 6.122. So x is equal to approximately 6.122. And that's my answer to question number 1. All right, so for question number 2, I'm going to write out SOHCAHTOA again. And by the way, I keep writing it out because I want it to get stuck in our heads, okay? And also because I want to be able to clearly identify which trig ratio we're going to be using. So here, the angle that's given to us is 48 degrees. So we're going to base everything off of this angle. Remember, trig ratios are always of angles. So I want to find this x right here, which is the opposite because it's across from the angle that I'm looking for. This right here is the hypotenuse, but I don't have to worry about it because we don't know what it is and we don't want to know what it is. We take only the information that's given to us. So the other piece of information that's given to us is the adjacent side. This side is adjacent because it is touching the angle. So I'm going to look and see which ratio uses opposite and adjacent, and that's tangent. The order matters, so make sure you always do opposite in the numerator and adjacent in the denominator. So remember, trig ratios are always of angles. So I'm going to say the tangent of my angle, which is 48 degrees, is equal to the opposite, which is the unknown, it's the x, over the adjacent, which is the 5. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to solve for x. So to get this x alone, I need to get rid of this divided by 5. But actually, I'm going to solve this a slightly different way. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a ratio. So tangent of 48 doesn't have a denominator, so I can always put a 1. And whenever we have a ratio, we can cross multiply. So if you look right here, when we cross multiply, I have 1 times x, which is x. Okay, 1 times x is just 1x. And on this side right here, it's tangent of 48 times 5, but remember, we always put the 5 first. So it's 5 tangent of 48 degrees. Okay, so now I'm just going to type that into decimals. So 5 times the tangent of 48, and I press enter, and I get this answer right here. We need to round to the nearest thousandths, so it's 553. The 3 is the thousandths place. There's a 0 that comes after it, which tells me to keep the 3 where it is. So my answer right here is going to be approximately 5.553. Okay? Now, you have 2 choices for a question like this. You can either multiply by 7 to get rid of that denominator on both sides, or you can cross multiply. The benefit of this is it's easier to just multiply by 7. The benefit of this method, cross multiplying, is it's not as confusing when the x ends up being in the denominator, which we're about to see. Okay? Okay, so in number 3, same thing. We're going to write out SOHCAHTOA. Okay, the angle that's given to us is this 32-degree angle. We want to figure out what x is, which is the adjacent right here. So this is the unknown, and we want to put 9 as the opposite, okay, because that's across from the angle. So right here, we're going to decide, are we going to use sine, cosine, or tangent? Again, we're going to use tangent because tangent consists of the ratio between the opposite and the adjacent. So it's always tangent of an angle, this time the angle is 32 degrees, is equal to the opposite, which is 9, over the adjacent, which is x. So right here, because the x is in the denominator, it's a little bit harder to solve for x right here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross multiply like I did in question number 2. So here, when I do this right here, it's tangent of 32 times x. I'm going to put the x first. So it's x times the tangent of 32, because it doesn't matter what order you put it in when it's multiplication. And then on this side right here, I've got 9 times 1. And 9 times 1 is 9. Now, my goal is to get this x alone. So to get this x alone right here, what I need to do is I have to get rid of this tangent of 32. So since this is multiplication, the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by tangent of 32, and those two will cancel each other out. But whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So right here, I end up getting x equals 9 over the tangent of 32, and then I just have to type that into my calculator. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to type in 9 divided by the tangent of 32, and then press enter, and this is my answer here. Tenths place is the 4, 0 is the hundredths place, 3 is the thousandths place. The 0 that comes after this 3 tells us to keep the 3 the same, so my answer is 14.403. Okay, so this is approximately equal to 14.403, and I am done with this question. Okay. All right, lastly, question number 4 is asking us to find BD and to find AB. Now, on your paper, you do not have a right angle box, and you can never assume that these are right triangles unless you have a box there. But I'm telling you that you should have a box there, so please add it in. Now, the other thing I want you guys to be aware of is because this is 180 degrees, if this is 90 degrees, then this angle over here, angle BCA, also has to be 90 degrees. Now, because it asks us to find BD, so here's BD, so B to D, this is one side length it's asking us to find. I'm going to call this X, and it's also asking us to find AB, so here's another side length I'm trying to find. I'm going to call this Y. And I have to decide which one am I going to find first. Well, I'm going to go with the one with the side length that is part of a triangle that has the most information in it. So I have 2 triangles that I can look at. The first triangle that I can look at is this left triangle right here. But when I look at this triangle, the only information I have besides the right angle is this 45-degree angle. I don't even have a side length, so I can't do anything really right now to figure any side length out yet. So let's take a look at the triangle on the right side, okay? I have an angle, but I also have a side length, which means that I can figure out what side length x is right here. So let's go ahead and do that. The angle that's given to me is 60 degrees. I know this 8 right here, and we know that this is the adjacent because it is next to the angle, and we know that x is the hypotenuse because it is across from the right angle. So I'm going to write out SOHCAHTOA, and I'm going to do some work to find out what BD is. So right here, because we know the adjacent and the hypotenuse, that means that we need to determine, are we going to use sine, cosine, or tangent? Well, if you take a look right here, adjacent over hypotenuse consists of, or sorry, makes the ratio cosine. So that means I'm going to use cosine. So cosine of 60 degrees is equal to adjacent, which is 8, over hypotenuse, which is x. Now I'm going to make this have a denominator of 1, and I'm going to cross multiply. So x times cosine of 60 is just going to get written out like this, and 1 times 8 is just going to get written out like this, right here. So now that I've done that, my goal is to get this x alone, so I'm going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division again. So I'm going to divide by cosine of 60. But whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So that means that x is equal to 8 divided by cosine of 60. So I'm going to type that into my calculator and see what I get. So 8 divided by the cosine of 60, enter, and I get 16. Nice even number, I don't have to do any rounding. So here I get x is equal to 16, and x was our BD. So we can say, therefore, BD is equal to 16, and we're done with this first part. Now I need to figure out what AB is going to be. Okay, so let's do some work for AB. So right here, in order to figure out what AB is, I need to no longer have this as an x here. I know that this is 16. So I can put down that this is 16. It's no longer a mystery, okay? So I still don't have any information in this triangle right here. So that means that the first thing I have to do is find out how big BC is first. So to find out how big BC is, I have to do a little bit more trig on this triangle right here. So let's find BC first, because that's going to help us find AB. Because once I know BC, I have a side in this red triangle that I can use. So right here, we know that this BC right here, we'll call this Z. We know that this is the opposite, okay? And we also know the hypotenuse. So if I were to use SOHCAHTOA right here, this time, I would use the ratio that has opposite and hypotenuse in it, which is sine. So I'm going to find the sine of the angle, which is 60, and I'm going to say that's equal to Z over 16. Okay, then I'm going to multiply both sides by 16, so that 16 will cancel, but whatever I do to one side, I do to the other side. So 16 times the sine of 60 is what Z is. Okay, then I'm just going to type into decimals. 16 times the sine of 60, and then I end up getting 13.856. So right here, we're going to write down this is equal to approximately 13.856. Now that I know that this length right here is 13.856 approximately, I can get an approximate answer for what side length AB is, or what Y is. So right here, because this is our angle that we're looking at, 45 degrees, this 13.856 is now the opposite, and this Y has to be the hypotenuse because it's across from the right angle. So using SOHCAHTOA, since I have opposite and hypotenuse, I'm still going to use sine. So I'm going to say that the sine of 45 is equal to the opposite, which is 13.856, over the hypotenuse, which is y. I'm going to make this over 1, and I'm going to cross multiply. So sine of 45 times y is y sine of 45. And 1 times 13.856 is 13.856. I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 45 to get rid of that sine of 45. And because the opposite of multiplication is division, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to type that into my calculator and go from there. Now, when I type it into my calculator, I would rather use the previous value that I have here. So I'm just going to take my answer as opposed to typing in 3.856 because this is a rounded and approximate answer. And then I'm going to divide that by sine of 45, and I get this answer 19.595. The 9 after it tells us to round this 5 up to 6. So I'm going to say that my answer is approximately 19.596. And that's all I need to do for this question. All right. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.